series. We are honored to receive Master Jan Silberstorff, someone we hold in great esteem here in Brazil. And I would first like to thank Master Jan Silberstorff for his kindness to join us. I also want to thank my cousin Eduardo Molon, who helped us to organize this event. Thank you, Master Jan. Thank you, cousin Molon, for your kindness. And I trust that this meeting will be very nutritious, as I say. So, in terms of the knowledge we are going to receive on the art we love so much, that's Taijiquan. So I'm going to ask my team, everyone that is supporting this event, that once we are able to start the Portuguese streaming, please let us know. I think it's on. I'm testing it, but I believe it's on.
Para que a gente possa oficialmente.
That's great. So for us to officially start, whenever we have that streaming on, please make a time. I'm going very briefly to introduce both the team and Master Jan. So the team is Sofia Nestrovki, Sofia is the presenter of one of the greatest podcasts in Brazil on science and books. She has a master's on Portuguese literature. Julia, who's our interpreter, is also an anthropologist and also a literature instructor. Julia is our interpreter. Julia today is our interpreter. Gabriel Guarino is a martial artist, a poet, and an educator. Myself, I'm also an educator. I teach Taijiquan, and I have my own research in Chinese culture for more than 30 years, and I represent Master Chen Xiaowang in Brazil. Clara Yani is a visual artist. And we also have Igor Preciso, who's our designer and helps us with all the graphic work that we do and share on Instagram and YouTube. Finally, we have Eduardo Molon, Chen Tai Chi teacher. He's a student of Master Chen Master is going to talk about it. He's living outside of Brazil, but he has a very important work in Brazil, also coordinating WCTA Brazil. Thank you very much, cousin, for your presence. So very quickly, I'm going to introduce the person who will be at the center of the stage today. He was a teenager when he started practicing Taijiquan. Seems that he started with the external Kung Fu practices, but he was interested in internal practices. And please correct me if I miss any of the concrete dates, but it was around the end of the 1980s you decided to make a trip to China for the first time to dedicate yourself to learn Taijiquan. You went to Xi'an and then to Chenjiagou. And you spent between 4 and 5 years there. You were probably one of the first foreigners to get there, trying to get your Taijiquan education. And I think much how would Chenjiagou be like in that decade? I went there much later, and it was already a very interesting place. And it was still a very interesting place, with a very particular way of, people had a very interesting way of dealing with life. And and the land, and I was very curious about knowing about what was like the place he found in the 80s. He became a disciple of Master Chen Xiaowang. When Master Chen Xiaowang went to Sydney, Master Jan still studied with him. Then he is one of the founders of WCTA in Germany. It's a huge association in Germany with more than 2,500 members. He's also one of the founders of WCTA Brazil. And he's the technical director of WCTA Brazil. Welcome, Master Jan Silberstorff. You're very kind to be here, and sorry again for this technical problem that makes it that we started a little bit late.
Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation, first, Jill. I remember your great invitation to Sao Paulo when I had a lecture in your school. I remember this, have very good memories on this. So thank you very much, and I'm happy to do something tonight again. So should I start directly with the question? Yeah, about Chenjiagou?
Claro. Primeiro quero já dar os parabéns pela... Pode ser, mas eu só queria...
Of course, I just wanted to say that he's wearing a very beautiful T-shirt tonight.
Yeah, I made myself very beautiful tonight, extra for your invitation, so I hope my dress code is fine.
Quem é Júlia?
I hope I'm not in trouble with Eduardo, because... No, okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so actually, thank you very much for your question, because this is not often discussed, I think, here on YouTube or Zoom, etc. Because Chenjiagou made a huge development in the last 30, 40, 50, 60 years. And actually, I went to China first in the late 1980s, but I traveled to whole China for, I think, 11 weeks to see 30 different Chen-style schools all over China. And I was before in Shandong province studying there with some small trained teachers, and only to find a Chen-style teacher for myself. I had one in Germany, a Chinese, but he gave me the list of his 30 schools, and I went everywhere from north to south and west to east for nearly 3 months. And in the end, I couldn't find something I really like in this way or what I was looking for. But I never thought I'm going to Chenjiagou because I thought, speaking in Portuguese and Brazilian way, I thought you cannot go to Pelé and knock on his door and ask him to teach you football. So I thought you cannot just go there and learn. So the only place I didn't go was Chenjiagou, but then I met my first master from Chenjiagou in Xi'an in a park, and he brought me to Chenjiagou. And my first visit in Chenjiagou was not in the 1980s, that was China and Shandong province, etc. And Xi'an in Shanxi province, but in 1992. In 1992, I went first to Chenjiagou, and when I arrived, to give you a picture how it was, I mean, there were no asphalt streets, no beton, there was only sandy roads, and we tried to go, my teacher was living in Rango, which is the neighbor village of Chenjiagou, and we needed 20 minutes by bicycle to go there, but the 20 minutes by bicycle we needed to go not because it was 20 minutes far away, but because there were so many holes in the sandy way that we couldn't even ride on the bicycle. We had to carry the bicycle because you couldn't go this bad road. And then we arrived in the south of, I always call it south of Chenjiagou, where nowadays Chenbing School is, but there was nothing that day. There was only the grave of Chen Xiaoping. That was, for that time, a huge building. Nowadays, you cannot even see it because of the huge building. And then you go the way up to the Yanglucha Museum on the left. It was closed because the person died who opens the door. He died inside, so nobody opens the door. So it was closed for 3 months, actually. And So this is how you have to think about it. And when I entered first time, I remember very clearly the kids playing on the street. They all ran into the houses. There were only mud houses, very few houses made of stones. Most were muddy houses. You could see the kitchen where it was black, where the mud was black, that's the kitchen. And so the kids on the street, when they saw me, they run to the houses, like in a spaghetti western, when the stranger comes into the village and everybody there. Streets become completely empty. And so they haven't seen foreigners much before. And then my teacher introduced me to everybody. We went from house to house. He introduced me to everybody, and then everybody came back on the street. So that was the first impression. That was a very simple farming village. You didn't see anybody practicing Tai Chi. It was just farmhouses, and they were outside on the fields farming. Within the houses, inside the houses, the Chinese farmhouses are in a how do you say this? And this has this kind of form, and the houses are like this, and in the middle is empty, an empty space, and there were the place where the families were training. And the only bigger building in Chenjiagou was the Chenjiagou Taijiquan school, the same school we know nowadays with Chen Xiaowang. And his father, Chen Xiaowang, is leading everything. So, of course, there were people practicing. But mainly, they were practicing at home, same as me. So, it was, if you just cross the village in that time, you didn't see much difference to any other village in China. It was very simple countryside village, muddy houses, no asphalt streets, no cars. And the people were farming and training at home. So, except the school, of course. And then later, of course, it became step by step this huge place as it is today. And interestingly, for people like me who came early to Chenjiagou, we are missing this old Chenjiagou. This has this romance of this, this pureness and etc. But I think if you haven't seen the old Chenjiagou, you can be super happy to come to Chenjiagou now, because now you have so much more to see. We have this huge museum, we have all the schools, we have the Yangguchar Museum is open now, and we have so much there. So you cannot say something is better that time or better nowadays. It's just very much different. And it was a huge development in the village.
Muito bom, mestre. Que incrível, sabe?
That's great. That's great to hear. When I went there the first time, 2015, I still found the streets. The streets were still sand streets without asphaltation that we see today, and the houses I had still seen then, the mud houses. And that connected me to my own history in Brazil, because I come from the northeast of Brazil, a region you know very well. And we used to have houses like that in the northeast of Brazil, made of mud. And that called my attention, and I thought, well, these houses look like the houses I grew up in Brazil. This is in 2015, and when I go, first time I went there was 2014. When I go back in 2015, I already found the process of the streets being paved and the village being, as we say, urbanized. And when we went in 2019, it was a whole different thing, a whole different city.
Yeah.
So there's the shops, all with a different pattern, visual pattern for it. And I also feel romantic about it.
Yeah.
Effectively, I was connected to that village of 2014 that I know, still a little bit similar to what you've seen. But today, the village that we visit is very exuberant and has many things to see, as you said.
Esse.
Before
E ele é que é mestre
Gabriel
aqui.
makes his question, I would like to ask you about how was the Chen Tai Chi practice in Chen Village around 1992, 1993. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure.
And next will be Gabriel making his question.
Maybe for some people in the audience to understand this, the small sandy road for the bicycles we went in the morning was like that, and there were a lot of holes, as I said. This is the street, the same street, which nowadays is I always say south. I never watched if it's really south, but down from the small mountain down, so south and outside of Chenbing School, nowadays Chenbing School, it was like that. And this is now a huge, it looks like a highway, right? Where cars go with 4 lines for cars. So it became from maybe 1 meter or 80 centimeters, it's now a 4 lines road of, I don't know how much is that now, maybe 40 meters.
Bem-vindo ao desenvolvimento.
So this is the change in 30 years now. So, and that time, as I said, there were a few masters who were free just for training, but all the others, they were mainly farming. And they did some Tai Chi when they came home. I was farming too. When I was living there, we went out to farm corn and peanuts. But of course, when we were out to farming, we tried our Tai Chi techniques while farming. So we tried to pick up the corn in a way of from Dantian move and this Fajin and you know, this. So like in a Karate Kid movie or something was very funny. But what my teacher did with me is he went
É legal, né? O que são essas varandas, né? Acho que
from house to house, and the house is like our own ones. It was very simple. We slept just on the ground, and the toilet was in the garden. You got a lot of mosquito bites when you went there because it's just a hole somewhere in the garden, etc. We went from house to house, and he introduced me to everybody. And there were, of course, most of them normal families, and some families had the masters. For example, Rengang Yao, he's not so famous. He has been not so famous. It's one person, Ren Guangyao, and I trained with him. From him, I learned the double sword form, for example, first time, and we trained within the houses, within the inner courtyards of the houses, so it couldn't be seen from the street. Or when I went to Chen Guijin's house, you know Chen Guijin, the queen of the double sword, people call her. Same, we trained inside the house. Same in the house of my teacher, we always trained inside. So when you walked the street, you didn't see much. When you walked into the Tai Chi school, of course, you saw people training, but from my teachings I received was always within the inner courtyards of the houses, nothing outside, and everything was pretty, I would say, very dusty and very hot. I came there first time in summer, it was very hot, there was no shower, there was no water at all actually, there was only for 1 hour a day was water, and we put the water and then we our heads, you know. So there were lots of mosquitoes, very hot, very dusty, and we had normal clothes, no Tai Chi silk clothes or whatever, just as we were. And the masters had shorts and barefooted, you know. It was very, very simple but very beautiful actually. And the food was corn and peanuts and corn and peanuts and corn and peanuts. But the corn was sometimes soup, sometimes bread, sometimes, you know. And so it was always the same, but in different ways made. So it was always very beautiful to sit together with the family and eat and train. It was very romantic, but at the same time very hard. Yeah, and the whole night you slept just on a wooden bed. There was no mattress or something, just wood. And
ela lembra o Geraldo
anyway, because it was summer. And again, all the mosquitoes and the mosquito spray. And when you were sweating so much and you were so thirsty, they came with hot tea, you know. And so it was for Westerner actually a little bit. You needed to get used to that, yeah. But people like you and me, if you say you grew up like this, of course it was. Not so problematic, but nowadays, of course, you have much more comfort, and it's not easy to say what is better. I'm happy about my time that time, and of course, because when I was there, I didn't see any other foreigner. So it was great. It was great because everybody cared for me. Very good. Everybody cared for me, for my Chinese language. Of course, it was great because there was no other language to speak. And what was a little bit exhausting was that you're always the center of everything because I was the only foreigner. So everybody cares for you. You never had rest. You had attention all the time from people, which is, of course, for Westerners maybe also not so easy to sleep with many people in one room, and the whole day you have people around you all the time without any. That was not so easy for me. But then in autumn, I think I arrived there in April or something. I don't remember too much clear, but in autumn was already the first international meeting of Taijiquan in Vientiane. Vientiane is the bigger city, 20 minutes by bicycle from Chenjiagou. I mean, another road now with bicycle. So it was some, I don't know, 4 or 5 minutes by car, and nowadays. And there was a big international meeting, and there were some foreigners coming. A lot of people know nowadays. Jarek Szymanski, for example, who was living in Shanghai, was there, and some others. So we made very good friendships, and all the masters were there. Anyway, that was a good thing too. All the masters were there. Chen Xiaowang, he was already in Australia, but Wang Xian, Zhu Jiancai, Chen Lei, and the sons of Wang Xian, and all those people were there, and you could get teachings very easy from all of them. So that was a good thing. And then came the international meeting, and so they built up hotels in Vientiane and big stadium for this and everything. So we had an opening ceremony. So suddenly there was a huge thing, but that was all outside of Chenjiagou. Nowadays they sometimes do it in Chenjiagou or in Jiaozu, but at that time it was in Vientiane. So the Chenjiagou didn't change at all. So all the touristic things which started then actually happened in Vientiane, and I like this because then Vientiane was there where all the trouble or all the big events were, and Chenjiagou was still this small village. Later it changed when it became bigger and bigger. So the teachings were pretty quiet, pretty on the person, and actually, for me, I was private because I was the only foreigner. I was only me and the teacher. There were no groups. Sometimes I had another Chinese to push hands with me. But in the school itself, that time I haven't been so much in this Chenjiagou Xieshao and the Chenjiagou school. But there were, of course, already Chinese and kids and doing they were next to the school. Here's the Chenjiagou school, and if you stay in front of the school, on the right side, there were the primary school where the kids went to school. So they went half day on the right side to the school, and half day they were training in the Tai Chi school. I mean, the normal school, and then Tai Chi. They just went 100 meters back and forth. So, but for me, it was more in this courtyards of the families to train. I didn't train in the school at that time.
Bom, muito bom. Só faz 3 anos que nós não vamos para Chenjiagou, só aumentou a saudade, mestre. Eu ouvi.
Chenjiagou. Aonde que é?
Esse
It's been so long, we haven't
eu sei, mas você
been
sabe
to Chenjiagou. It's so great to hear from the details of how it was like. It's a very special place, very welcoming place for us.
Então eles são da mesma,
audience
vamos
reaction
dizer, da
here,
mesma
listening
escola, da
to
mesma região.
what you tell us. Even for those who haven't been there yet, we feel that's a very special place. Let me just check. Maybe we have some technical problems with the translation. Is that okay? So I'll give the floor to Gabriel Guarino for him to make his question.
Mm-hmm.
Good afternoon, good evening. Can you hear me well? I hope we have fixed the technical problem. I think there was some overlap on the channels, but anyway, in the chat, it's possible for us to check that. I'd like to thank you very much, Master Jan, for your presence. It's great to be able to talk. And also it's a pleasure to see my teacher Molo and my colleagues. My question maybe has some relation to the first session of the series we organized. We have talked many times it's great about be able to the work of translating not only to Portuguese but to Brazil, to the Brazilian world. What is Taijiquan? Maybe when Lao Shijiu started to practice in the 1980s, he always tells us about how rare was any content or material about Tai Chi. We had some Kung Fu, the Hong Kong movies, but not much material available. I want to ask you, Master Jan, how was your martial arts world before you go to China, in Germany? What did you hear about Tai Chi and Kung Fu? What was the scene of martial arts in Germany? That was maybe your entryway to the path that took you to Chenjiagou later.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. This is a dangerous question because I can answer this 5 hours long, I guess. But I try to make it a little bit short. You know, the problem for us in that time maybe was, I don't think I say too much if I call ourselves pioneers of our arts in the West. And so when I started, there was no Tai Chi in Germany. I mean, I came from what I wanted when I was 18. I wanted some ways of self-defense. I had a lot of trouble with some how we call this, teenage gangs. I was in a gang by myself, and we were fighting against other gangs, and we were always losing. So we needed something to improve our fighting skills, and I wanted to learn something like Jeet Kune Do or something, or whatever kind of street fighting things. And actually there was a big sign on the wall at a subway station in my area with writing street fighting, every Tuesday evening street fighting. I thought, this is exactly what I need. So I wanted to go there, but then a friend of mine catch me and said, no, you come with me to my Tai Chi master. I said, to your what? He said, Shifu, Tai Chi Shifu. I said, I didn't know what it was, a Shifu. I didn't know what was Tai Chi. And he brought me there. And we were, that time, to be honest, we were pretty much in alcohol and drugs also. So he brought me there to this class, and I made my first Tai Chi class. And it was completely not what I was looking for. I wanted something quick and punching around. It was a young style class, yeah? So I wanted something kicking and punching and whatever, and then we make something like that. So it was absolutely unexpected. I didn't understand nothing, and it was not what I was looking for. But when I did this, suddenly I got such a good feeling within my body. I was very amazed. And after the training, I met with my gang friends from this teenage gang who were punks actually, and we met on the rooftop of a house where we were drinking, watching all over the city of Hamburg. And I said, I was just in this, I don't know how they call it, class, and I forgot the name, but it feels very special. If this continues, maybe I stop drinking alcohol and taking drugs. And doing that, and everybody was silent. Everybody watching me was silent. Everybody with his drink in the hand on this rooftop bar, you know, in the evening, everyone was silent watching me. And then one person said, that's good, then you can drive the car. You know? So, and that's what I did then. I stopped drinking, I stopped the drugs and trained this Tai Chi, but I really wanted it as a martial art. But nobody could teach me. The teachers, there were a few teachers doing some kind of forms, but nobody understood what really it was. My first Chinese teacher in Hamburg, I have to thank him a lot because he brought me very much into this way of Tai Chi, but he always also, when we practiced the form together and we finished, he always washed his hand and said, I'm pretty sure it's very useful for fighting. Just I don't know how. I have no idea how. And that was the thing. So I was searching for how this Tai Chi could be really learned and really be used as a martial arts. And I studied books, and I was so happy when I found 2-3 sentences that Tai Chi also is not only for health, but also a martial arts system, etc. Oh, see, it's written here. But nobody could do. So my Chinese teacher sent me to China. I told already before, with the schools and all the places. So, but I needed long time. I started in 1986. I think my first China trip was 1988 or 1989. And I met Chen Xiaowang, who was finally my teacher, or still is, in 1994. So I had around 8 years to put my energy into that I want to learn Tai Chi and to find a way how to learn it. Nowadays, we have a completely different infrastructure. If somebody wants to learn Tai Chi, they just, in Sao Paulo, if somebody wants to learn Tai Chi, he goes to Jill's school and starts to learn. And he learns traditional Chen-style Tai Chi. So same in Germany, just said we have a great big association there, that's true. So in 160 cities in Germany, we have schools now. So nowadays it's easy to go there and practice, but for people like us, we needed to find a place where is a person who really can teach us. And I needed 8 years, but this 8 years was not for nothing. I mean, I studied first with my first Chinese teacher in Hamburg. We studied Yang style and Chen style and some different Qigong systems and some basic Wushu movements, Changquan, etc. And praying mantis, Tanglang Quan, I trained a lot that time. Eskrima, I had an Eskrima teacher for stick fighting. And my first teacher from Chenjiagou, he was living in Xi'an. He did also Xingyi Quan. And I learned the whole system and a little bit Baguazhang. So this 8 years, I made a lot of different studies of different systems. And we did a lot of tournament push hands already that time. And a lot of fighting, Sanda, full contact Sanda, this kind of Chinese kickbox wrestling mixture. And my first teacher from Chenjiagou, he became a professional fighter. And he went to Xi'an then, he became a police instructor. So we made a lot of this kind of self-defense. So I arrived already with my wish for the self-defense. I didn't need it anymore because I was not in the street gang anymore, but in China. But but then after 8 years, when I met Chen Xiaowang first time, and he accepted me as his disciple, I stopped everything else. I stopped everything. Or I think I made 8 systems until that time, and I stopped all the systems and only focused on Chen Xiaowang for 2 reasons. First, I became his first Western disciple, so I felt it was a question of respect, just to train what he's teaching me, not 10,000 different things. So this is why I dropped. But the main reason also was he had everything I always wanted to learn. So I was always searching for exactly that. And then I could drop everything else because it was just for giving me ideas how maybe Tai Chi could have been meant or not. And then when Chen Xiaowang was there, I had everything I wanted. So I really started. So that was 8 years of time. And then I focused exclusively on what he was teaching me, and this is what I do until today. So, but that did not happen in China then, but in Australia, as Jill said, because he was living already in Australia. So I had 4 years with my first master from Chenjiagou. His name is Shen Qijing. And so I lived for this 4 years in China, studying with him, and then I changed place to Australia. To stay in Chen Xiaowang's home together with his son, Chen Yongjun. Mm-hmm. And then actually, maybe to finish that, we started, as Jill also said, the association, and we founded that worldwide, and I followed Chen Xiaowang teaching all around the world, teaching here. And then finally in 2002, I followed him to Brazil, to Rio de Janeiro, in a seminar, and that was the beginning of my time in Brazil. And when Eduardo asked me to found this association that was in, Eduardo, which year was that? 2009 maybe or something. Then I lived there for 12 years until Corona came. Now I'm in Bulgaria with my family. Yeah. Opa.
Muito bom, muito bom. Guarino, mais alguma consideração? Podemos seguir?
That's great. Gabriel, any other consideration or comment? No, we can go on. I just wanted to confess, Master Jan, that here in Brazil, very far from Germany, when I was a teenager, there were teenager gangs, and as a child, I belonged to one of those gangs in the outskirts of São Paulo, and my brother Marcio said that it was a gang fighting for lollipops because we were children. But it was nothing really violent, but it was very common at the time. It's this little gangs belonging to a group or making use of someone and having that bodily ability or that skill, something that would mean that your gang was superior to the other. One street against the other, we were all children, and forever I was curious. And then before Sophia, I will ask Molon to make a comment. Before he makes his comment, I would ask Master Jan to talk a little bit more about the moment when you met Taijiquan in the perspective of a potent internal work. In the first moment, I see that it was not very explicit how that could be applied concretely, but you saw the relation it had with self-defense. I know that, I don't know if that's clear in your experience, but how much Taijiquan put you in contact with other Chinese tradition of the cultivation of the body and the spirit, like the culture of Taoism and the readings of the Tao Te Ching. Was Taijiquan the starting point for you to meet with other Chinese traditions?
Yeah.
Could you comment
See,
on that?
Thank you very much for this question, because this, you spoke about this teenage gang, so maybe I start from here again. We had problems with skinheads a lot, and there was very brutal fights actually. And I saw people dying with this, and so I saw a lot of violence in my teenage times. And that was not good when I saw it, but it helped me a lot later in China because of this experience I made before and what I saw before in this gang fights. I could clearly understand when I saw masters in China to understand which really makes sense for me or has skills. I mean, later I saw other foreigners who were this kind of, how do you say this in English? They were attracted from everything. They just saw a Chinese moving and thought, okay, this is a master and this is great what he's doing. And I was much more differentiated. I was watching clearly and said, okay, no, I don't think that what this person is doing over there has the potential to stop this kind of skinhead aggression I had in my teenage times. You know, so from this experiences in Hamburg, I could see very clearly in China later who really had this what we call Kung Fu, this kind of skill really to resist real aggression, who did not. And this helped me a lot to find my way to good teachers and not getting lost with whatever, because we have this in the West that of course, as long as a Chinese and has a silk cloth, he should be a master or something. So I never had this problem. I could go very clearly because of this understanding. But the thing then was, I started to train because I wanted to be better in resisting this kind of aggressions, because we always had these fights. But then because I trained, I was not there anymore where the aggression was, because I was in the gym, I was in school, I was at weekends, and I was in China anyway and learning that. So I was not in the place anymore where I needed that. And then later I needed this because I became in the martial arts world, I became a little bit famous, so people challenged me. And then I realized, okay, you need your fighting skills not for the skinheads anymore, or for some street fights, but you need it because you train it. That's why you need it, because you became a little bit famous, you're in magazines, and now people challenging you, and you need to win, and this is why you need it. So it became a little bit strange. You train self-defense because you need it, because you train self-defense. You know, it was a little bit funny. And but then in the nature of Tai Chi, it is that when you train more serious, the moves becomes more internal. If it becomes more internal, you become more quiet and calm inside. If you become more quiet and calm inside, it slowly becomes more and more philosophical. If it becomes more deeper philosophical, it becomes more spiritual, and even maybe religious. Depends on how you focus on it. And the thing is, in the beginning, I was pretty clear that I choose martial arts only because of fighting. But I always asked me why it has to be this Taijiquan. I mean, we had so much in Germany that time of boxing and wrestling and Western martial arts, which are pretty good systems, and why it needed to be this Asian martial arts, why you make all this action to go to China in the 1980s to learn. I learned Chinese on Hamburg University and all this kind of things, only to learn something, instead of going on the other side of the street in a German wrestling school and boxing school to learn my fighting skills. And years later, I realized it might be because my father got pretty ill when he was 51 years old. He got a stroke and half the body was unable to move and the brain didn't work so good anymore. So maybe by subconsciousness, this drove me to the Taijiquan because this is much more healthy, and it helped me to get out of the drugs and alcohol. And later, my friends from that time, half of them died because of alcohol and drugs, and I'm still living, as you can see. So it's not too much to say that Tai Chi saved my life. And so the health aspects become more and more obvious for me. In the beginning, I was too young to realize that I was looking for this truth. I always thought it's just for fighting, but it's not true. Something inside of me drove me to this Tai Chi, maybe because of my father's problem, I don't know. And and then I started also with sitting meditation. I learned different kinds of sitting meditation in Chenjiagou. So, but I got the technique from Chenjiagou, but to practice the sitting meditation, I went to Sri Lanka, because Sri Lanka is a place of early Buddhism, and they're pretty hardcore in the Buddhist temples. I went to some hermitage there. Buddhist monk helped me, and I made pretty hardcore retreats for 7 years in silence to do this meditation and practicing a lot of Tai Chi. That time, I practiced 12 hours a day, even more than in Chenjiagou. I think in Chenjiagou I practiced 8 or something. So I could practice 12 hours a day, and becoming more and more deeper inside, of course, became more and more spiritual. And the interesting thing for me was, when I was starting this Tai Chi, when I was 18, 19 years old, I read the Tao Te Ching, and I didn't understand much of it. And that what I thought I understood was just, I mean, you read the soft overcomes the hard, you say, okay, and you turn the page, and but you never question what does it mean, the soft overcomes the hard, because obviously it's not like this, right? If there comes a storm or a typhoon or something, it destroys everything. And so I did not, even what I thought I understood, I did not understand. So I didn't understand the Tao Te Ching then. But then I didn't read the book anymore. And then 20 years later, I think I was 40, maybe. Yeah, I was 40. I opened the book again, and it was very easy to understand. And I thought, oh, wow, it's more like, how did Lao Tzu know this truth? You know? So it was like, it was completely easy to understand. And the difference between 20 years before and that time was not that I studied Chinese philosophy or this or that. No, it was the experience of the practice, which made it so easy to understand. I had 20 years of Tai Chi practice, and all this meditation, this Tai Chi meditation stuff, and that made the experience I did with them made it so easy suddenly to understand this text. So I started to write Tao Te Ching commentaries, which has 6 volumes finally, with 1,500 pages altogether. And so I wrote a huge volume of Tao Te Ching commentary, and I started to teach Tao Te Ching. And for me, it's very close combined the Tai Chi as a system, then the outcome as a martial art, that you're able to fight with this, and same time the health system, of course, and also not only the philosophical but the spiritual part of it. Because from my point of view, we are boys, we like this kind of martial arts, self-defense, I mean, why we do? I mean, in Brazil it's different. In Germany, I can say easily, we don't need it. It's a pretty safe country. In Brazil, I was living there 12 years, maybe you need it, but the question is, if you know how to defend yourself, maybe you bring yourself also into danger, because if somebody points a gun on you and you try to, you should not try anything, So maybe in Germany is not enough violence to justify a daily self-defense practice, and maybe in Brazil the situations sometimes are too violent that you also should not use your self-defense skill, because maybe the situation escalates if you try to fight against person with weapons in their hands, right? So, and I developed the philosophy that if you win a fight in self-defense, maybe it keeps you in this way healthy, because you're not ending up in hospital and you're not maybe dying on this day, because you successfully could defend yourself, but you survived the day. But later you die anyway. So you postponed the problem. You didn't solve the problem. You understand what I mean? We are all dying one day. So if you don't die today, we die later. So self-defense could make me postponing the problem. Also the healthcare, that I'm not getting ill, can postpone the problem of dying, but it cannot solve it. So I became more and more interested in the spiritual part, because I thought if something is out there to overcome what we call death, then it's the spiritual, it's the spirit and not the body. So if you see it from that viewpoint, the most effective self-defense technique is spirituality, not physical fighting. So, and maybe that's the reason, I don't know, why in traditional martial arts system both are so important coming together. The spiritual and the physical. And for me, that made the thing complete, and that's the big difference and justifying all the actions to learn an Eastern martial arts compared to a Western one, because you don't have that in the Western ones. The wisdom in that way is missing. And this is reason enough to travel to the end of the world for learning and practicing, instead of going just to the other side of the street in your country in the West.
Muito bom, Messi. Muito obrigado aí pelos comentários. Deixa eu só fazer uma breve pausa aqui, só para agradecer aqui a nossa audiência. Nós estamos aí com transmissão.
We make a pause to thank our audience. We are streaming onto different channels. The first with the original audio in English, there's 20 people there. And then we have a channel streaming in Portuguese. I would like to thank the presence of Cristiane, Yusa, Fernando, Jader, Luciano, Soraya, Marco Moura, we have a question here from Edgar. We're going to read it later. I'd like to thank all the people who are here on both channels. Robson is here too. Alex Hayes, who's in France now. Welcome, Robson. thank you, Master, again for sharing your experience with you. We have a very famous Brazilian educator in Brazil who's also studied in China, Paulo Freire, a thinker, someone who did work on education, what we call popular education in Brazil. And I learned that his books are studied in Chinese universities. And what she said a while ago about how much your practical experience in Taijiquan met the theory of it. And Paulo Freire talked a lot about that. He proposes in his ideas that practice should enlighten theory, and theory should shed light on experience. So, listening to you, I thought of Paulo Freire. And also, when we read your books and books of other authors, like Molon and Master Chen Xiaowang, we also feel that. So, let's move forward. Sorry, I want to thank the presence of Milton Gonçalves, who is a very dear practitioner working with Taijiquan and horse riding in Brazil. So, dear cousin Molon, any comments before we talk about Master's latest book on the biography of Master Chen Family? Please, the floor is yours. Thank you, my cousin, Master Jan. It's a joy to be here with you today. One comment and one question. First, I would like to express my deep gratitude towards Master Jan, both for his long time work on Taijiquan and for the personal instruction he gave to me, which was fundamental for anything I have ever learned about Taijiquan over the past years. I wouldn't know a third of what I know without what you taught me.
this, and it's a different culture, it's a different understanding. And in my time, when we come back to the first question tonight, as we went to the East as pioneers to get something, to bring something here which was not here before, for me it was essential that I learned Chinese in university. Without speaking Chinese, not much would have happened, because there were some foreigners earlier than me. I was not the first one there, but most of them, they didn't speak Chinese, so they could only copy the movements. And they brought home, in all respect, they brought home empty movements. It was a good start, because this is better than nothing. And without this, I would never have come into touch with Taijiquan. But of course, Taijiquan is what we nowadays call an internal martial art. And alone this word internal martial arts means it's not easy to understand, because it's something internal. So it's not easy to grasp or to understand or to get it. You have to develop this. I mean, external ones you have slowly developed too, but the internal problem of the internal one is you cannot see. You don't understand. You touch and you fly back or something, but you don't know how this happened. And so it was not only that I had to travel 10,000 kilometers and had to search all the time, but also I needed to understand these people, because they speak Chinese in China. They don't speak German over there, right? So I had to study Chinese language, because I thought I need to ask questions. I need to understand what they tell me. So also I learned the language, and but that was finally I was very lucky that I had this decision and the possibility to learn the language, because I'm pretty sure without speaking Chinese, I would not have become the disciple of Chen Xiaowang that time. Because if you speak the language of the country, of course, the doors. At that time, there were so few foreigners in China. I lived in Xi'an, for example, Xi'an, Shaanxi province, for 1.5 years. There was at that time a 4 million city with 4 foreigners. One was me, one was a missionary, and 2 students. And so if you were a foreigner there, that was always very special. But if you then could speak their language, then everybody was, of course, there was very open-hearted and very amazed. Wow, you speak Chinese, how come they speak Chinese? Da, 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 da. So they helped you with everything you wanted, and you had open doors everywhere. This is one thing. The second thing is you could understand what they tell you. So you could not only bring the movements home, but you could also explain them. And for myself, my job in the last 30 years, is like a bridge between East and West, because I bring the things from the East to the West. But I'm a Westerner, so I know how Westerners, maybe better Europeans and South Americans, but how they, like to learn, or how they used to learn, what is needed for them to get attracted to that, and what is important for them, how they can understand it. So how you bring the things from the East to the West. And there's a culture difference. And in the beginning, if you go 2 weeks to China for holidays, it's funny to see the culture difference. But if you live there, it's also sometimes pretty hard, because you're not used to this. And there are a lot of difficulties. And so my disadvantage was that I'm not Chinese. The advantage also was that I was not Chinese, because I was a Westerner, I had a better way to meet the person's abilities to learn, because I knew how to teach them that they can learn, because I'm one of them, right? So the disadvantage was that I'm not Chinese. I didn't grow up in this culture. I had to learn, or there's a lot of Chinese learning, a lot of cultural learning to understanding. But because I lived with my teachers together in one room, with my first teacher, we lived together in one room for 4 years with his family, his small kid, and etc. So of course you grew up in this Chinese communities. I didn't meet foreigners there. The other 3 foreigners in Xi'an, for example, I never saw. So and then when I lived with Chen Xiaowang together, we also lived together in one house. So you get used to the Chinese culture, but you are from the West, and this enables you, of course, to find maybe a good way for Westerners to understand this art. The first thing what people need, and this is difficult in nowadays time, is patience, because it's so much to learn. It's not easy to understand. It's so foreign. It's so much Eastern, or we do, that people need patience to learn. It's an internal martial arts. You explain them something, they try to do it, and they don't feel anything. Right? So how to bring them over the first weeks and months where they don't really understand, where they don't really feel, and where they don't have any results after the training. They do some whatever kind of movements, and then they still cannot fight. They still don't feel any energy or whatever. But you have to make them continue to come, right? And this is, I have to confess and give Eduardo right, this is an art by itself. Right? How to keep people coming to your class until it starts that they feel it by themselves, right? But I think we did not too bad, actually. With the help, of course, of all our Chinese masters. Yeah, Jill's master, Chen Xiaowang, he's supporting a lot of coming even so far to Brazil, to Europe. Yeah, Chen Xiaowang was traveling 30 years, I think, every year to all our countries. So in this teamwork, I think it would have been possible for people to learn even in the West. But it makes completely sense really to understand the art out of the culture who developed the art. So it is a good idea not just to take the technique, but really to see it from the eye of the Chinese culture, if you really want to understand it. And then comes what Eduardo was asking me, the part of the question comes now, how the people also reacted. For example, when I started to teach, I was teaching in Hamburg in an external martial arts school. I had my separated Tai Chi class, and they did some kind of kickboxing and whatever kind of kung fu, whatever, with a lot of strikes and punches, and I was standing in my Zhangzhuang. And they were always laughing, you know, they came with their boxing gloves, and they went for shower, and their mineral drinks, sweating, and they felt very tough and on the heavy bags and along. And I thought I'm the only one who really don't learn anything. I was just standing here and waiting that something happens. And saw all them boxing and kicking and thought, oh my God, why you choose that? But then by time I developed some skill and I got more confident, but they were still always laughing. And then I said, okay, where are your tournaments? And I went to their tournaments, and I was lucky to win and could give. There was a good way for me via tournaments to show the people that it works what we're doing. Because they were laughing, you go there, you win against them, and then they stop laughing, they respect you. Okay, so fighting on tournaments was a good way to get respect. For example, today is a special day because one of my students, he's competing with our Tai Chi Chuan and mixed martial arts tournaments, and there was a pretty tough grappling tournament today in Germany, and he won the gold medal, you know? So, and by this, people stop laughing about Tai Chi, you know? If you get beaten by Tai Chi, then you don't laugh about it anymore. So the martial arts in the beginning was a very good tool for me to show other people to respect Tai Chi and to try it by themselves. In the beginning, when I was starting, nobody took me serious. And after my tournaments, I made 25 tournaments and I won all of them, or at least winning means I get place 1, 2, or 3. I get always a medal. I was never without medal. I went never without medal home. But after this 25 tournaments, it changed completely. A lot of masters of other styles, Hongga and Shaolin and Wing Chun and whatever, they showed up as private students. They didn't dare to learn in public because they're masters by themselves with their own schools, but they came for private lessons. Suddenly I had all these famous masters in Germany as private students. So some of them changed for Tai Chi, some not, some just get some ideas or something, but there was a community growing then where Tai Chi suddenly was included. There was a martial arts community without Tai Chi before, and suddenly Tai Chi was included, and not just as a health exercise for old people, but as a fully respected martial arts. And this changed the martial arts community, the Eastern martial arts community in Germany a lot at that time, I guess. And then later, when the Chinese masters came anyway, Chen Xiaowang, he's one of the toughest fighters we have, came, and Chen Xiaowang showed his Fajin and etc. And came even up to that we were teaching special forces and police units, etc. Simply because they wanted to get this thing that nobody can move us, you know. That we're not falling down, that they cannot move us, but we can move them easily. So it was a long journey, but exciting, because it started from everybody was laughing up to even teaching special police units. We were teaching the bodyguards of the Czech Republic president, actually. Yeah, with Taijiquan, and this is also part of our work. So I think, there is some information I hopefully could give from all this 30 years, how we developed to bring this into the West and into the acceptance of the people. Maybe. Thank you.
Muito bom, mestre. Muito obrigado, primo, pela pergunta, viu? Pelo comentário também. Sabe que quando eu voltei, eu não passei 3 nem 5 anos em Chenjiagou, passei ali 8 meses, e quando eu voltei para o Brasil, com esse desafio de ensinar aqui, acho que eu até comentei isso com você, primo, eu me perguntava muito, como é que eu vou ensinar esse jeito de treinar Tai Chi Chuan, a moda Vila Shen, aqui no Brasil, que a gente tem uma relação com o Tai Chi Chuan, uma perspectiva muito, não só mística, mas uma perspectiva muito que é uma atividade para as pessoas mais velhas, é uma atividade que só traz benefícios terapêuticos, né? E essa dimensão do marcial, o treino mais, digamos assim, mais forte, mais duro, às vezes ele fica um pouco escanteado. Então foi uma pergunta muito providencial. Te agradeço muito aí e mais uma vez obrigado, mestre, pelos comentários, tá bom? Olha só, turma, a gente está chegando aí nos nossos 25 minutos finais aqui de conversa. E eu queria reforçar quem está nos acompanhando nos 2 canais, tanto em inglês quanto em português. Se tiverem perguntas, escrevam aí no chat, que a gente vai deixar um tempo reservado para essa interação com o mestre, tá bom? Eu queria agora abrir aqui com a Sofia um bloco para a gente falar da mais recente publicação do mestre. O mestre lançou um livro aí inspirado um pouco na história, na biografia do grande mestre.
Master Jan, I'm going to open the floor to Sophia. Master Jan has recently published a book on Chen. Here in Brazil, it's a little bit difficult because people see the word Chen and they think fake, because there's lots of talk about fake news here in Brazil right now. So it's pronounced Chen. And that master was responsible for opening maybe a new era in the development of Chen Taijiquan. And your book talks a lot about that. And I'm going to give the floor to Sophia to open a set of questions about the book itself.
Thank you.
Muito obrigada, Mestre Jan Silberstorff.
Thank you very much, Lao Shi. Thank you very much, Master Jan Silberstorff, and everyone who is participating. I'm going to talk about this book here, Master Jan's most recent book. If you do not know, it is a book available, a book by Master Jan, available in Portuguese. Gabriel Guarino is showing it on the screen. Soraya Lasperda has translated it, and she has already participated in translating Chen Taijiquan. this book here, well, that book are text by Jan Silberstorff, and this book here, the new one, is very curious because it has a story of an adventure of the story of how it has been published. So I would like to ask Master Jan to tell us about this story, about how those manuscripts were found and finally published. He tells that story on the introduction of the book, but maybe he could tell us a little bit more about it here. And I will ask him to tell us a little bit more about who was Chen Family and why is he so important in Taijiquan history. And about the biography, that may be an autobiography, why is this biography so important for Taijiquan practitioners? What for those who are on that path? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for the question and introducing my books. Actually, the first book, the Chen book, we introduced this when the Portuguese translation was finished that time. First time in Jill's school. I'm still very happy. I remember this event very, very beautifully. And I think actually the shirts are from this event, right? I think you gave me as a present that day. Yeah. Thank you. The book, interesting, the published the book was not so much that I thought if it is important or not for the Tai Chi community or something, but it was a promise, actually. I promised. When I came first time to Chenjiagou, I said before already, I came to this sandy street and then came to Chenjiagou, and my teacher was from Rango, from the neighbor village, and he brought me from door to door to see everybody and say hello to everybody, that everybody knows me, and I went to some masters there to train, etc. But there was one person, he came out of his house on the street and he pulled me in his house. He was an old person. I never asked how old he was, but I guess around 80 years old. He was an old person and introduced himself as a primary school teacher. I mean, not for Tai Chi, a normal school teacher for primary school. And he pulled me in his house and he pulled me into his bedroom, actually. And then he lifted the pillow and he took a manuscript out from the bed, which was hidden under the pillow, and he looked like he slept on this pillow, on this manuscript. And he gave it to me. It was a handwritten manuscript, and he gave it to me and he said, "Please bring this to Germany." He said, "To your country," yeah, but I'm from Germany. So, and I didn't know what it was, and I could speak already in a way fluently. I mean, I needed to understand, and then I could say already everything I wanted. Maybe not everybody waited as long as I needed to make the sentences. But having some time, I could say already everything I wanted to say. I was a little bit more slow than later. So I didn't know what the manuscript was about, and I couldn't read it because it was handwritten and it was an old manuscript. And so I asked my teacher to check it, and he couldn't read it too. But he asked the person, and he said it's something like a biography of Chen Family, and that he lived together with Chen Family in Beijing for some time. They lived in the same, and this, I'm not so much sure if I understood this correctly, in the same room, but for sure in the same apartment, in the same house in Beijing. So he spent time with Beijing in Beijing together with Chen Family as a roommate or housemate, but they lived together. They saw every day, and they were both from Chenjiagou. So he gave me this text and said, "This is from the time we were living together. Please bring this to Germany and publish there." And I was a little bit surprised because why he doesn't publish in China and why he wants me to take it away. I wasn't sure. Maybe he has some. He was old. He knew about the Cultural Revolution, and maybe he was still in this kind of fear or something. I have no idea, but I felt unworthy to take it because it looked like it's the original. It was the real handwriting, and I had no students in Germany. I mean, I was young. I was just about to learn it. I didn't know how to publish and especially who should read it because there were no Chen style community in Germany at that time. And so I wanted to give it back to him. I said, I'm sorry, thank you very much, but I don't feel worthy to do so because I don't know how to do it. Better you take it back. And but then I thought, oh, wait, maybe we go to the next city and we make a copy of the text. So I take a copy home, not the original. And this is what we did. We went to Vientiane, but of course what I was not thinking about that time, that it was 1992, and it was China. And for example, when I came first time to China in, I don't know, 1988 or 1989, when I arrived in Beijing airport, the airport was so small. There was just one building, very cheap, very simple made building. There was nothing. There was a smaller airport than, I don't know, maybe one of the smallest airports I've ever seen. It was really a very small airport. There was only one street, there was only one car, which was the bus from the airport to the city. And it was very, very simple, everything. Even Beijing was very, very simple. And so we went to the small city, somewhere nowhere in Henan province. So they had no copy machines. What they had is this, I don't know how to say this in English, but what we had in school also when I was a kid, a cheap way of copy. We call it in Germany, we call this Matrize. I don't know if this makes sense in English. It's some way of copying, but in a very cheap way. So this I had, and I had this copy. I gave him back the original, and I had this copy. But I didn't thought about first, the original already my teacher couldn't read, and that was already more worse than the original. And the text disappears by time because the paper was in a way that the text disappears by time. So, but that was the copy we had, and then I tried to find someone who can read it, but nobody could read it because the handwriting was so bad. A lot of characters were missing because the copy was so bad, and it was written some maybe 30 years ago or something. I think it was written in this text. The original handwriting was maybe in the 1960s or maybe even earlier. I don't know. So nobody could read. I had a Chinese girlfriend at that time. She couldn't read too. So I took it later, years later, when I came back to Germany. I took it to Germany. I asked some people in Germany, some Chinese. I knew they couldn't read it too. So I forgot about the text. And I wrote in the preface about 10 pages about this story, I think. I make it now a little bit shorter. I forgot about the text, and I even lost it. And then when I changed my living place, and took all my stuff to the new place, I found it again. That time I had another Chinese girlfriend, but in Germany I gave it to her, and she couldn't read it too. She gave it to her mother. She was a very famous doctor for traditional Chinese medicine, so I was hoping she could read, she could not. But then she didn't give me the papers back, and we separated, and I forgot about that too. And some 5, 6, 7 years later, I forgot. Now I met her again, and she said, well, by the way, I still have your papers. So it took, in the end, I think, I have to read it in my book again, but I think it took 24 years or something finally, until I found Wang Ning. He specialized on seal writings and old Chinese writings. Seal writings is from 2,000 years ago, and he's a calligrapher, and he could read it actually. And he translated that for us, and it's a text from this school teacher's time when he spent this time together with Chen Family. And what makes it so interesting is that the school teacher did not train Tai Chi at all. So for him was no personal interest in the text. Yeah, it was not about to advertise something or not. He was just interested that this time was written down, and the text is in the I perspective. So Chen Family in the text always says, I went for the competition, I went there, I went there. So it looks like that Chen Family wrote the text by himself, but maybe the school teacher was writing what Chen Family was telling him and used it as a literary style to write from his perspective. But it doesn't matter who wrote this or not. I guess it was a school teacher who wrote it. But this is not the important question. The important question is that there was an eyewitness standing next to Chen Fa-ke. Chen Fa-ke went somewhere and he was with him. He saw all this and he wrote it from his perspective. So we have a text originally from this time. And we don't have so much material about Chen Fa-ke. We have students who say something and some that. And because he did not do Tai Chi, the focus of the book is not so much on practical training or whatever kind of Tai Chi, but more on the social aspects of Chen Fa-ke's life. So you learn a lot about how he was thinking, how he was feeling, and how he saw Beijing in that time. But of course, there are a lot of challenges inside. So there are fights inside and some important things. For example, he was amazed, Chen Fa-ke is telling a lot about that he came from the small village to Beijing and he was amazed how much martial arts are there. And he was very happy to have so much exchange with masters from other styles. And he's saying that he learned so much from other styles. He was seeing techniques of other styles and he was taking techniques into his own repertoire, etc., etc. And he said that it's good to improve by exchanging with others. And we know that Chen Fa-ke developed his form to what we nowadays call Xinjia, right? So he came with the Chenjiagou form, and then he changed a lot in the form that we nowadays call a Xinjia. So these changes might come also from this exchanges with all the other masters. One of his good friends was a Qigong master, so he got a lot of internal techniques also. He saw a lot of external techniques. He was fighting with the people, etc. So this all formed him to the person he is. And the question was why he is so important for us. And he is so important for us because first, everybody says that he has a very high level. Yeah, they called him Tai Chi Yiren, that means the best in Tai Chi. So he also Chen Xiaowang, who has a very high level by himself, which makes him unforgettable in history. Even he says Chen Fa-ke was much, much better than him. So he is said to have this very high level. This makes him, of course, very interesting for us. This is why I made in the book also all the pictures of the forms. I brought them actually in the correct order because normally what you see is not always the correct order. So that you can really see all the pictures of the form in the correct order so you can feel a little bit how he might have moved. And and he was the person who started to change the form in the direction of what we call Xinjia now. That makes him also so important. But maybe same important is that he was the person who went out of Chenjiagou and made it public. I mean, he was not the only one. Chen Xiaoping did the same. Later, Chen Xiaokui did it too. And then, of course, came Chen Xiaowang, who made it all over the world. So you can say, okay, Yang Luchan went from Chenjiagou to Beijing and started teaching. But when Chen Fa-ke arrived in Beijing, it was already what we call Yang style. There was a lot of changes already. So Chen Fa-ke was the first from Chen family who came out of the village to teach in Beijing. So Chen Xiaoping and Chen Xiaokui, the next generation, they were, especially Chen Xiaokui maybe was more in charge for teaching it. No, both Chen Xiaoping and Chen Xiaokui were teaching that within China. And Chen Xiaowang, then next generation, teaching all around the world. So we have, I have to say that Chen Xiaoping was first went to Beijing to teach and also to Nanjing, etc. But to make it simple, you have Chen Fa-ke, 17th generation, went outside of Chenjiagou to teach in Beijing to make it famous there. You have the 18th generation of Chen Xiaoping and Chen Xiaokui who teaches within China. And you have the 19th generation of Chen Xiaowang who was teaching 30 years all over the world. So from this perspective, all started with Chen Fa-ke going to Beijing. Otherwise, without this, maybe none of us nowadays would know anything about Tai Chi Chuan, Chen style especially. Yeah, I'm talking about Chen style. So this makes the person so important, all this together. And I think the manuscript is some unique piece describing parts of Chen Fa-ke's life you cannot find in the normal biographies, which are only focusing on the Tai Chi thing. And but giving a lot of information as him as a human being, with his feelings, thoughts, and how he sees the world. And I have also some chapters in the book explaining, giving some more informations about the background of this informations, giving how they fit to other biographies or not, what might be the differences and this and that, some analysis of this text. So, and yeah, I don't know, looks like the people like the book because I published last year, but we have it already in 4 languages. I think it's in German, English, Polish, and also now in Italian language. It will be published until the end of the year, I guess. Italian translation is already finished. And yeah, thank you very much for helping me to make this book known.
Muito obrigado, Mestre Jan.
Thank you very much, Master Jan.
Chenjiagou, que me parece que essa
And the gods of Chenjiagou have helped me to hear that this book is already being translated into Portuguese. Is that right?
Oh.
Can we say that here?
Is it?
I don't know if that's it's real news.
Eduardo, I have to ask you, is it? I don't know.
Spoiler aqui?
A gente está empurrando a Soraya Lacerda para retomar.
We're trying to push Soraya Lacerda to go back to her translation work.
Thank you very much.
And
That's
translate that book.
Thank you very much. It's a big surprise for me. I didn't know this, but it would make me very happy because Soraya also translated my Chen book and she did a very great job. And yeah, I think, when after 24 years, the book really were published, for me, I could fulfill my promise to the school teacher because I never saw him again. I'm pretty sure he's dead already. So when I was thinking all these years that he might have died already and the text is still not published, I felt bad. And now when I published it in German, I said, okay, I fulfilled my promise. A little bit late, but thank you very much. So I was, then to see that it came into other languages so quick, I was even more happy. And if you tell me tonight also that it might be in Portuguese soon, of course, I'm very happy in the name of a school teacher. I cannot imagine how he would feel if he would have known that the book gets so much spread now, even after a quarter of a century, which I'm still a little bit ashamed of.
Muito bom, muito obrigado, mestre. Bom, eu vou abrir aqui a nossa rodada de perguntas, de interação.
That's great. Now let's have a round of the questions from the audience. I'm going to follow the order of the questions that were asked here. So the first one, I'm talking about the Portuguese streaming here. So sorry, Edgar is asking, is there any difference in the technique of Laojia and Xinjia? And in what ways can we work through those forms to work on the qi? What is your perception on the differences between Laojia and Xinjia? And do that means different mechanics or different ways of conducting qi? Thank you, Edgar, for your question.
Thank you very much. This is a very controversial question because a lot of people have a lot of opinions about this and they're discussing this a lot on social media, etc., etc. So I give you my experience and my point of view on that. I started the Xinjia practice actually, and I started with the Chenjiagou method, which is called like that. And later I changed to Chen Xiaowang, which is this what people call the Chenjiagou line, and there's the Beijing line. But when I had a time also where I trained, I took private lessons with Chen Yu for some time, who is the son of Chenjiagou, teaching mainly in Beijing. And he, because of a lot of discussions going around all this, he asked me to perform in front of his students before we made push hands. And so I performed my Chen Xiaowang Laojia form in front of the what we call Xinjia form of the so-called Beijing line, means from Chenjiagou, Chen Yu. And after the performance, he watched all his students and said, 你们看吧，这是一样的劲. That means in English, have you seen that? This is the same power as we have. So he wanted to make clear with this sentence that even if the training methods of the so-called Xinjia form and the so-called Laojia form might be different, the outcome is the same. And when we did push hands, also we could prove that it is like that. So, and Xinjia and Laojia, now I speak, okay, see, I'm a little bit thinking because it's late already how much time we have, but see, Chen Family changed things in the form. But then Chenjiagou continued to change things in the form. And then Chen Yu continued to change things in the form. And his students also do. So if you speak about this form, we have, of course, a timeline, of, I don't know, but 80 years or something, 90 years, where the form was developed. If you see, you can find easily on YouTube a video of Chenjiagou, it's 11 seconds, where he makes a punch. And in this 11 seconds, you can see that the form is still not the Xinjia version as we know it nowadays, but already not anymore the Laojia version, which has been before. So that means that Chen Family was not the end of this development. If you see Chen Yu also, he makes much different than what Chenjiagou did on this video. But Chenjiagou was already old enough that he learned this fully from his father. So that means first we have to understand there is not this one form. It's always a process. Yeah, same with all the other forms actually. So in Beijing, it developed more and more to a different training method than maybe we do in Chenjiagou or Chen Xiaowang is doing with me. But this has not been all the time like that. Yeah. If you see, for example, when Chenjiagou came back from Beijing to teach in Chenjiagou, the development of the form was not as it is nowadays. So when the four Buddha's warriors and Chen Xiaowang learned the form from Chenjiagou, the form was more close to Chen Family as it is nowadays. And if you see the pictures of Chen Family in the book, you see them much more close of what, for example, Chen Xiaowang is doing nowadays in Xinjia than the newest generation of the so-called Beijing line. What I want to say is, if I speak about the way we understand the Xinjia form training in Chenjiagou, the method, how we train this, is different from the method of how they train it in Beijing. But the question now, speaking about the Chen Family book, is which version is more close to what Chen Family was teaching? Yeah, is it the nowadays version with a different method to train, or is it the version from the time Chenjiagou was teaching in Chenjiagou, which the people still practice like that? So if I practice the Laojia and the Xinjia, for my practice, how I do this, the Xinjia form is different from the Laojia form, not only in external moves, but also the way I do it and the way of rhythm. You have rhythm in it, there are much more externally spiral movements, much more jumps, much more this and that. And but the way to execute it is not too much different. Yeah, I mean, it is different because of rhythm, because of different movements, but the principle behind is pretty much the same. And this might be different to the modern so-called Beijing line. This is why I don't want to enter this discussion now, I want to say how we do it. And from this perspective, how we do it, I want to explain the differences. So the principle behind is the same, but the moves and the way how you do it is the same. It's different because, for example, the Laojia form is very calm, and you don't change this. Yeah, if we don't think for the sometimes Fajin movements in between, it's always the same speed, very calm, and in a way slow. This is pretty similar to the Yang style, for example, or Wu style or something. From the taste, the Xinjia is more rhythm, it's more this, it has some slow, then more, a little bit more quick, more, yeah, it has rhythm. So, Yang Luchan learned in Chenjiagou, went to Beijing, and later developed into Yang style. Chen Xiaowang told me that his father, Chen Xiaoshu, the oldest Tai Chi trained son of Chen Fa-ke, when Chen Xiaowang was a kid, his mother always asked him, his father, Chen Xiaoshu, was training in the garden, and he was asked to bring father inside for dinner. Dinner is ready. So Chen Xiaowang, the small Chen Xiaowang went outside to say, Papa, dinner's ready, please come in, mother is calling. He said, okay, wait, I need to finish my form. So Chen Xiaowang was standing there as a kid watching his father until he finished the form, and then they went in for dinner, but that happened that evening, okay? So what he remembers from the time he was maybe 6 years old or something, what he remembers from this time is that his father was moving very slow and very calm. Not in a way of dong, 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 but very slow and very calm. And this is the way we do the Laojia still nowadays. And if you do it so slow and calm, and you do the energy work, it really becomes inner alchemy in a way of Taoist viewpoint. It really becomes inner alchemy, and really your mind becomes empty, that after good practice and good progress, you learn from the unmoved mind to move energy, which moves the body, but remaining the mind unmoved. And this is exactly what you find in the Tao Te Ching, that from the Wuji, the Tai Chi comes, right? So the Wuji is always there, the unmoved, the emptiness, but from the emptiness, everything comes into being. And this is exactly what we do in the Laojia form. We stay completely empty, and from the emptiness, all the moves arise, but the emptiness does not disappear by this. So if you see the empty circle of Wu, of the Wuji, the empty circle of Wuji, the Tai Chi is within the empty circle. There comes the S and the 2 points. So the Tai Chi, the duality is within the non-duality. And this is exactly what you express in the form. And this is why you get a very deep insight into this kind of spirituality. This is why you learn to understand the Tao Te Ching, and you come into deep meditation and understand these concepts of Lao Tzu's Tao Te Ching, which later formed Taoism as a philosophy. So if you train the Xinjia, it's more lively, it's more, you have rhythm, you have more fajins, you have more spiral movements, you have this and that. And that means you're more into inaction. You feel like more fighting, you feel like more, it's more sporty, it's more this and that. You feel more into life. So this is a way of, it's a good thing, also for fighting, of course. Yeah, I advise often students of mine when they go for tournaments, when they become already very good in standing, that nobody can push them out of their structure, but sometimes they're too in a certain way too stiff. They're not stiff, but they're too träge, how to say this? It's like laziness. Sometimes they're not flexible enough to adopt together. So I advise them to train Xinjia, because then they get more subtle for small movements to react, etc. And but you're not getting, by this way of moving, you're not getting so deep into this spiritual silence. So it does not transform you as a human being so much as the Laojia form does. And from the Kung Fu, it depends on how you see it. The Xinjia has more spiral movements, more jumps, more fajins. I mean, the more fajins doesn't count because you can make every move in the fajin. But yeah, so you can say, oh, there are much more techniques in the Xinjia form. But because the movements are more simple in the Laojiao form, but you have the same alchemy, the same energy work in a way, it's even more difficult to do it in the Laojiao form because you have much smaller ways to do the same thing, because you cannot express so much in the outside. So on a high level, you cannot say the Xinjia form is more difficult, maybe even the Laojiao form is more difficult. For beginners, the Laojiao form is more easy because it's more easy to learn the external moves. But really, to have all the subtle energy work, you have not so much external expression as in the Xinjia, so maybe it's even more difficult in the Laojiao. And never forget the most famous fighters, Chen Xiaowang, yeah, Chen Banting anyway, but this is another chapter. But Chen Banting, for example, Chen Genjun, his son, and Chen Fake, they used the Laojiao form. Yeah, when Chen Fake developed the Xinjia form, he was already famous as a fighter. Yeah, he had already all his fights you can read in the book, for example. Also the ones in Chenjiagou, etc. So the people who really used it for fighting on battlefields against the Taiping rebels when they came to Chenjiagou, for example, yeah, and the Chen family when they made this escort bodyguarding services in Shandong province, yeah, to protect travelers and their goods, etc. This was all the time of the Chen Xiangxing form, means what we call nowadays Laojiao form. Yeah, when they fight for their lives. The period of Xinjia comes from after the 1930s, where they used it as a martial art, but not anymore as a combat system for battlefields or real security services. So they were fighting in tournaments and in Kung Fu schools. Okay, so you cannot say the Xinjia is more effective because they have more movements, because it's not proved. The people who really fought for their lives did it with the Chen Xiangxing form, which we nowadays call Laojiao form. So, you know, it's a question without a concrete answer, because it depends on how you train it, depends on what you want for training. And I'm very happy to do both, actually. Yeah, and it's different mood. Right? To make it very simple, maybe for people who cannot follow what I'm talking about now, maybe more for beginners. When I was living in Brazil, I was living on this island directly at the ocean. And the morning I trained inside. That means I had walls and it was very quiet and calm inside. And I liked so much to do the Laojiao form, and it was so beautiful and so empty and silent and so spiritual. And in the afternoon, I went to the beach. There was wind, there were people and everything. And I like much more to do the Xinjia form, yeah, because it was more, yeah, the waves and the wind and everything, you know, it felt much more like doing that. And you know what I mean? So it's different flavors, different way to do it. If you're so deep in silence, simply said, if you're in a silence retreat in Sri Lanka, I was every year for 28 days, I was completely in silence without seeing anybody, without a book, without a mobile phone, without nothing. Just my clothes on me for 28 days. And if you're so deep in silence, you do 5 hours meditation, sitting meditation a day, and then you do your forms, you don't feel like jumping around much. You know, because you're really so deep and then you do this Laojiao form, and it's so profound, it is so amazing how this, yeah. But if you're more in society or whatever, maybe you like more, a little bit more like sport, this and that, and then you feel like more doing this Xinjia form, you know? So it makes sense to train both. On the other side, if you don't do it as a professional, maybe you don't have so much time, it's better to decide for one, maybe. But you cannot say one is better or worse than the other. You have to say that they are different. And coming back to Chen Yu's sentence, developing the same energy. So, yeah, I'm sorry to become a little bit longer for you. Simple question. Thank you.
Muito bom, mestre. Bom, 2 comentários aqui. Um comentário primeiro do Robson Rodrigues, que comentou aqui com a gente que, na verdade, o livro que a colega Soraya está traduzindo os 5 níveis do Taijiquan. Esse já está aí em processo de tradução. E aí também a Soraya fez um comentário aqui, eu vou fazer uma tradução bem livre aqui, tá? Soraya comentou que Chen Family sempre inspirou a vida dela, a jornada dela dentro do Tahiti, e que está, assim, bem perto do coraçãozinho dela de traduzir essa obra, mas me parece que 5 níveis está na frente. Mas, pelo que ela comenta aqui, ela tem um desejo aí de traduzir Chen Family também. Obrigado, Sora, pelo comentário. Mestre, para a gente não avançar muito no tempo, tem mais 2 perguntas, mas eu acho que a gente vai ficar em uma pergunta só, porque a segunda pergunta tem a ver com a Lao Jailu e o uso da Lao Jailu em defesa pessoal. E pelo que você comentou já, eu acho que o Marco Moura vai capturar na tua resposta anterior elemento para essa pergunta dele. Tem uma pergunta / comentário do Rômulo, que é nosso praticante aqui também de Chen Tahiti. Ele comenta que a Alemanha tem uma grande tradição de pensadores ocidentais. O sinólogo, por exemplo, Richard Wilhelm, por exemplo, é um deles. E ele até comenta que o mestre Jan também pode ser considerado também um grande pensador, um grande articulador aí do pensamento ocidental, juntando com o pensamento oriental. E ele pergunta como é que o pensamento alemão se aproxima do pensamento chinês, mestre?
Actually, there was no translation, so I'm not quite sure what to answer. But maybe if
sorry, I have my microphone closed. Sorry, I'm going to synthesize the question. So, Romulu's question, who's also a practitioner in our school, is about German thinking, German tradition of thinking. There's many important intellectuals in Germany, also sinologists. He refers to Richard Wilhelm. And he says, yourself, Master Jan, you are also someone who is an important thinker in bridging Eastern and Western ideas. And Hobel wants to know if what are the common elements, if there are any, between German traditions of thinking and Chinese ways of thinking. Can you comment on that?
Thank you very much. This is also a great question, which deserves our own webinar.
Imaginate.
Yeah, I would love to do this now in 1.5 hours to answer, but maybe I'll try in 10 minutes to. First, we have to understand there is not the Chinese thinking and the German thinking. Of course, there are a lot of different schools and ways of thinking in China. Of course, I think around 1.3 billion. And same in Germany, 80 million. Every person thinks on his own way, but of course we have different schools of philosophy and etc. Yeah, so you have a lot in China. You have the Buddhist way, the Taoist way, the Confucius way. This is the most famous ones, but then all the other schools of philosophy, etc. And same in Germany. But then we have the culture is also built a lot by religion, right? We have the Christian culture in Germany, same as in Brazil, but the Brazilian also has this candomblé and this and that. Yeah, so it's also a different way of understanding that. If you go to a holy mass, in a Christian mass in a church in Brazil, you find a completely different way of celebrating this than, for example, in Germany. Yeah, in Germany they sit very calm and yeah, you know, and in Brazil maybe it's half a party or something, you know, to make it simple in words, and it depends on what kind of church you go. But you have this Christian background in Germany, and you have this Buddhist, Taoist, Confucius background maybe in China. Maybe let's compare this two ways of thinking. And we have this idea in Germany, maybe more of this logical way of thinking, yeah, to make everything in a way of logic. And maybe it's, the modern China also is different than the China I was living in. They had a huge development in the last 30 years. But when I was living there, maybe the best example to give this, in Germany, people say very clearly yes or no. It is like this or it is like that. So, and when I learned Chinese, the first thing I realized is they don't really have this clear yes and no in their language. I mean, they can say something in a negative or in a positive way, of course, but it's always a little bit, it's always a little bit like the yin-yang symbol. You say something, but you also leave a little bit of the other, yeah? And for example, a good example maybe is if you read Tao Te Ching in the original, the Chinese language, the terms for hard and soft. The term for soft, if you see the characters are pictures originally, right? If you see the original picture of the modern character for soft, you find also some small parts in the character which expresses hardness. And if you see the character for hardness and you bring it back to the seal writings where you more clearly can see the picture, you see some elements of softness in the character of hardness. So in the Chinese language, if you say hard, there is already some small amount of softness in it. If you have the expression for softness, you have already a little bit of hardness inside. Same with all the culture. When I was living in China, we made appointments. It doesn't mean that it happens like that, because you say 5 o'clock, but that doesn't mean much that time. They came 4:30 or 5:30 or something, and in Germany if you say 5 o'clock, it's 5 o'clock. It's not 4:59. It's not 4:59, and it's not 5:01. It's 5 o'clock. Yeah. So you have this more determined in Germany, and this more fluently things in China. And I think both has its disadvantages and advantages. From the philosophy point of view and from Tai Chi, of course, this flowing idea of a little bit like this and a little bit like that is very beautiful. And yeah, especially for the philosophy of flowing and letting go and be in the here and now and everything, So you have this. But for concrete things, for the normal day life, sometimes it makes big problem. Yeah, it's better than you can really rely on something 100% without having all this all the way. Yeah, it can drive you crazy by time. It is always not really this, not really that. It's always something in between. So, but there are a lot of similarities also. If you see the I Ching, the book of I Ching, and the question I was asking also about that we have some intellectuals in Germany, famous ones. If you see Gottfried Leibniz, for example, I don't know if this is known. He invented in Europe the system, the dual system of zeros and ones. Computers working nowadays with the dual system. We normally work with decimal system with 10 numbers and then repeating, right? So, but you can express everything also with just 2 numbers, 0 and 1. And this is what he was creating. And then the Jesuits, who lived in his lifetime when they lived in China, they were the first who translated the Tao Te Ching into Latin language and made the first commentary. They wrote a lot of letters, thousands of pages of letters. They communicated with this Leibniz because they found the I Ching, and Leibniz was just inventing the dual system, and they were so surprised, how much similarities are with this. The I Ching has the yin yang, and the duality has the zeros and ones, and all the combinations out of that. So then on this recognition, the Westerners, the Jesuits and Leibniz, etc., they formed a way of understanding the I Ching in a very logical way. They started, for example, with 6 yang lines, and then come the first yin line, and it climbs slowly up, and come the second yin line. So it has very order. And then if you see, for example, other orders, like the Fuxi orders or Confucius order or something, it is much more mixed in a way and has a different concept behind. So also this logic understanding of the West, or you ask for the Germans, has another approach maybe than this understanding of maybe Chinese way of understanding. I mean, the book I Ching is from the Chinese, so of course we have to understand their viewpoint. But see, for Tai Chi practice, for example, nowadays, if you have been a Chinese in the last centuries in Chenjiagou, you were born into the Tai Chi tradition. You see your parents doing Tai Chi, you see the neighbors doing Tai Chi everywhere. the people. Tai Chi is all around. You grew up with this. You copy. You learn without explanations. You learn like we learn a mother language. Yeah, Jill, I'm sure you learned Portuguese. You don't remember how you learned Portuguese, right? I asked in Jun one day, when did you learn the Laoja form? He said, I don't know. What means you don't know? He said, when did you learn German? I said, I don't know. He said, that's the time I learned the Laoja form. So yeah, you get the form with mother milk, you can say. Yeah, you raised up. Everybody's doing Tai Chi. You copy, you learn, you touch, you see, and then you have it by yourself. So you learn it by intuition. So you teach it by intuition. This is why the Chinese way of teaching is also different. They don't explain much. Not because they don't want or something. They didn't learn it by that. They learn it another way. So when I came first to China, my first Chenjiagou teacher, he said, when I told him that I want to learn, he said, don't do it. Foreigners never will learn this because the culture differences are too big. And after some time, he said, okay, maybe foreigners can learn this, but Germans not, because you ask too many questions, you know? So, because you always want to know everything exactly. And, but then came a big change. The family system started we taught outside the family, and classes started. People come to class sometimes and they go home to train, right? And then they were teaching outside of China. The way most of us in the West learn, they go to weekly classes, they go to maybe weekend seminars, they go to the school of Jill, for example, yeah? But then they go home, and at home is not this Tai Chi all around tradition. So they see it for a short moment, and then they hopefully practice this, what they learned at home by themselves. But on this way, you cannot learn it by intuition. Second languages, for me, English, maybe, yeah. We learn not by intuition, we learn by explanations. And what Chen Xiaowang did, when he did not do it because of his traveling to Western countries, but it was a great coincidence. He did it because of Cultural Revolution. They forced him to work as a carpenter, and working as a carpenter, he understood that everything has to be very much in detail and very much correct, that this all sticks together. If he makes furniture or something, everything has to stick completely together and not just a little bit like this or a little bit like that. So he became much more concrete with things, and then he started to explain the system also more and more concrete. And then he went to the West, and that was of great help, because when you make a weekend seminar and people coming, they can learn a lot on the seminar by explanations. Because the time for intuitional learning is not long enough. For this, you have to stay with the family. You have to be born in the family, years of, yeah? But in short time of teachings, you need a lot of information you carry home, and these are explanations. So the most of the people nowadays learning Tai Chi, they need explanations. But this kind of explanation is more from the logical mind, is more a Western thing. So nowadays, we both come together, the Eastern art and the Western way of explanations. I asked Chen Xiaowang once if there's still secrets left, and he said no. And then he was watching me, and I was watching him, and he said, do you know since when there is no secret anymore? I said, no, since when? And then he pointed to his own nose. He said, since me, because I made the system explainable. Think one more time. If you learn it only by intuition, how can you give it to others? How can you write a book about it? Etc., etc. If you learn it by explanation, you can explain it. You can write about it. You can talk about this to others. You know what I mean? So for me, when I learned years before, I lived already years in China before I met Chenjiagou, before I met Chen Xiaowang. But when I met Chen Xiaowang, for me, he was very much like I was used as a German, because he was so logical. He explained me every single move. He corrected me millimeter by millimeter in my correct structure. And he explained me everything. What is the use of this? What is the use of that? How is the energy going in this move? How is the energy going in that move? And he had a principle he could explain. The 1, 2, we always call this the 1, 2, 3, 4, right? With the moves. He could explain everything. And I was so much, I said, wow, you're German, let me see your passport. Yeah. So I think these two different ways of thinking or cultural ways of brain work, they also come more and more close to each other by time. So we understand the Chinese culture better and better, and they become also more logical and starting to explain things what they maybe didn't do before in that way. And to the cultural backgrounds, I wrote 2 years ago, I published a pretty big book. It's 450 pages, where I compare the Tao Te Ching with the Bible in a way of, not in a way of religion, because the Christian religion is completely different from the Taoist, but in a way of how the world comes into being, how we came into being. And I discussed this in 450 pages. And I think there I try to express all the differences and similarities also sometimes between both cultural backgrounds of thinking and religious understanding, something like that.
Uou, muito bom, mestre. Bom, a gente ficaria aqui mais
That was fantastic. We could spend 6 more hours.
Thank you.
Here, but again, I would like to thank Molon again. I'd like to thank the team, Julia, my partner, whose voice is failing because she has worked a lot this week, and who is doing the interpretation today. Clara, who's in charge of the technical part of streaming. Gabriel Guarino, and we had some trouble in the stream, but we were able to solve it, thankfully. Sophia, who very quickly volunteered to do a very close reading of the book and offer us their comments. Everyone who's watching us on both channels. Maybe that number has changed along the time of the transmission, but we're very happy. Everyone is sending their thanks to Master Jan, Nilza Santos, Romulo, Tai Chi from the city of Salvador, Carvalho, Marcelo Gifoni, Fernando. Everyone is very thankful and very inspired by all that they have heard here. Thanks so much again, Master Jan, for your kindness, for opening your mind and heart to us and sharing your knowledge. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for me too. Thank you for this translation. I know I'm talking much and quick, so I think you did a great job. So thank you very much. Should be exhausting maybe to translate me, but you're one of the best I met, by the way. I remember very and clearly also when I was in Sao Paulo and you translated me, it was very great. So thank you, Jill, very much to invite me. Thank you for Eduardo and everybody joining us. And yeah, thank you very much. And I hope people didn't fall asleep too much.
Imagina, ninguém saiu, viu, mestre? Todo mundo continua aqui.
Everyone is here. Jada sends a hug. Alexei.
Thank you for everybody.
And that's it. Thank you all. Soon we will have another session of our international series with other authors from abroad helping us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a good night. I mean,